Welcome to the Asking Why podcast. I'm your host, Clint Davis, and today we have a good friend of mine and also one of my doctors, Dr. Casey Payne. Welcome, Dr. Casey Payne.
Hello, and I'm a PA. Just don't want to take any credit.
That's
this
right.
word's not due.
That's right. So, physician's assistant. I'm
Yes.
sorry. So tell us a little bit about you. You co-own Integrative Partners with Dr. Ellie Hudnall.
Mm-hmm.
And, I know you from church and from kind of seeing your work and looking for, healthcare that's a little outside the norm. But kind of tell us about what you do and where you're at and all that stuff.
So Dr. Hudnall and I have Integrative Partners. It's a concierge practice that also provides functional medicine, and it's one of the only practices in the area that really provides functional medicine from providers who've studied, and we'll get more into my education later. But it's a fairly new practice, and we're very excited about that. And then we also co-own with Dr. Rick Michael and Paul Goodry the Longevity Center, which has some modalities in town for anti-aging, things like that.
Yeah. I think, for me, what brought me and JC to you was, we had kids with allergies and, I think I lived in a world where I grew up just doing whatever the doctor told me. Not saying you shouldn't listen to your doctors, but sometimes I find that within therapy, within health, as the world has changed over the last 20 or 30 years, as our health has changed, as more sensory issues and allergies have come up, as we put more medicine in our bodies that we don't always necessarily need, it's been interesting to see, for what most of us, if we're 40-ish, 50-ish, think is normal, everybody's changed so much that we need some more specific care sometimes. And so what happened with us is that we went to doctors, went to, our pediatrician to deal with FPIs, which is what we had, which was very rare. And we kind of got the same treatment as you would for anything else, or they just didn't know what to do. And so then we had to go to Dallas and get specialized care. And it really just opened my eyes to the need to, one, have somebody who can kind of look at your body robustly.
Whole picture.
Yeah, and look at it holistically, which is why we switched from Clint Davis Counseling to Clint Davis Counseling and Integrative Wellness, because we started wanting to partner with people and go, hey, yes, we're doing therapy, but man, if you're going to a chiropractor or your doctor or your physician or your PT, are they looking at your mental health? We had a bunch of miscarriages and, we went to our doctors and we lost the babies and nobody ever said, hey, how's your anxiety? Or, hey, you need to look out for depression, or you need to look out for these things. And it just felt like everything was super siloed up. And so in our own practice, we've been trying to kind of partner with people and look at them, yes, integrate psychology and theology, but also integrate all these other ways of looking at maybe what the root causes are. And so, getting to see what you're doing has been amazing. And I think that it's not in a competition with other doctors. Like some of my friends are ER doctors. They have their own practice and they do wonderful work, but it's going, and some people need more than just the basics.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a huge rise in autoimmunity, which really, makes you wonder where that's coming from, because we see it in kids, adults, and that is really from a product of our environment. We have to detox so much. If you look at the label of a Reese cup from 1980 when we were eating them, and now there's a lot more ingredients, and those are ingredients that our body has to recognize as foreign and deal with. And so looking at that holistic picture is really important and something that I've really enjoyed. I have found that when I was finding these things, like necessarily, or for example, a positive ANA with autoimmunity, if I was sending a patient to a specialist to evaluate that, they were mostly getting a congratulations that it wasn't something significant. Thank goodness you don't have lupus. And they were supposed to take that congratulations and just live with that. But they still were kind of stuck with some of these more vague symptoms to deal with. And so that's where we kind of step in and say, how can we augment what your body is already trying to do? How can we upregulate your immune system when it's needed, but then also downregulate it when it's really kind of on overdrive?
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So tell me how you got into that. Like what did God do to drive you into that direction?
Yeah, it's definitely a calling that I'm so glad that I answered from him. It was in 2020, and really COVID is what prompted me to look at the bigger picture, because when we were all so afraid because we didn't know what COVID was going to look like or what it even was, I kind of looked around and was like, why are we closing down gyms? Why are we forcing people to do, things like get a vaccine if it's not in the best interests of their health? And certainly, the mainstay treatments were helpful, but it just made you really kind of say, where is the root of this going? And so that's whenever I listened to podcasts from functional medicine providers and heard their stance on really looking at why certain people really responded the way they did with COVID, why someone could get tested on a random Wednesday and be positive and not know it, and then someone else could be in the ICU with it. And it really depended upon their genetics, their genomics, their nutritional status, their vitamin D level, all of these things. And it was exciting to me to take into that to account, because those are things that we can change and modify, certainly not our genetics, but our genomics we can, and our nutritional status and things like that.
Mm-hmm. So what were you doing before you kind of transitioned into this? Were you just working at an ER or doctor's office?
So I've always been in primary care.
Okay.
And so it was a really easy transition to just incorporate this. But to further answer that question, once I listened to the podcasts of the functional medicine providers and realized that was something that interests me, I then began taking the modules online to pursue certification. And I've completed all the modules. I've taken the IFM certification exam. I've passed that. And then I'll complete my case report in July and hopefully be a certified functional medicine provider.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah,
I know what it's like to take all those tests.
Yes.
Okay, so for those of us that are dumb, or those out there that are smarter than me, what is functional medicine? Like, what is the difference between that and just medicine and if you go to your doctor?
Yeah, so functional medicine is not something that you can pursue, straight out of school. You have to have a base knowledge of medicine and then build upon that. When I took these functional medicine classes, they were teaching us how to look at the whole picture, not teaching us the basics. Mm-hmm. And so what you would look at is, where can you implement lifestyle changes? Where can we use herbs or supplements that are going to provide the same benefit as a medicine or work in a different way so that you don't need a medication? Our treatment model today is a reactive model. And so when you're sick and you can present with a certain symptom, we're looking for a medication that would remedy that symptom.
And when you say we, you mean the primary care, medical field,
in general.
not mm-hmm. Integrative Partners.
Right. Medicine in general. That's the way our medical system is set up. And, there are a lot of people out there that are trying to implement some changes. Like if you've heard of Dr. Casey Means and her brother Callie Means, and some of these people are trying to shake up the system and really get us to look at a bigger picture, a wellness model. But what we do is try to look more at, okay, if you have this particular symptom, is there a deeper root cause? We treat a lot of things that are really kind of in mainstay medication. They're not as recognized because there's not a specific medication that would treat them. Like I help a lot of patients who've been exposed to mold, do detox programs through that. And a lot of, like I already mentioned, autoimmunity, but then also a lot of autonomic dysfunction. That's a big... What we are really good at is helping people with catch-all diagnoses, mm-hmm. Where you sort of like got this kind of symptom conglomeration, let's put a name on it, like irritable bowel syndrome or autonomic dysfunction. And those things are true. The autonomic system is dysfunctional, but we can, if we take a good history and really see what's contributing, can really look far enough upstream and possibly see what's causing it and address that while also doing nervous system regulation. A lot of it is trauma, which you are so, well versed on. Our mental health has a huge impact on our physical health, and we really try to address that by speaking to the patients with mind, body, spirit in mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's huge. I mean, I think one of the problems that we have is the difference in instant gratification too.
Yes.
You know, we have this bottom up, top down problem. We have us as consumers who want to go to our doctor and we feel bad and we have a fever and we want something to fix it and take it away or address it. And it could be that you wait 3 days and your fever goes away, or you take this ibuprofen and Tylenol and suppress that fever or whatever the issue is, and it goes away, but then you get another secondary issue later.
Absolutely.
You know, it's like the things that we see, or I see in our clients, is the same way.
Yeah.
And it's like, I have some anxiety, and it's like, okay, well, have you drank water? Have you done any deep breathing? Have you read your Bible? Have you walked? Have you been outside? Did you get good sleep?
Yes.
It's resoundingly 90% of that's no.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, okay, but you want to go to a psychiatrist and pay $100, $200, $300 to get an assessment, to then take a pill that then adds to that mess other things that you don't know, and now we're dealing with other things. And again, I'm not saying that people shouldn't take medication for that. I'm saying that, you know, what we want is a quick fix instead of a weekly, monthly, how can I do the things that I can't do? And how can I talk to my therapist or my doctor and go, okay, I know you said I should drink water, but here's my problem. I can't, you know, I don't have a water bottle. I don't know how much water I should drink, right? There's all this education that has to come with it that I know you guys do, you know, but we find ourselves as clinicians doing the same thing. And so I think we're working together with people, and us kind of coming together as a community is, I can stick to the thing that I'm good at and go, hey, go see Dr. Payne's office, you know, go see, you know, Integrative Partners. They can deal with this stuff, so we can actually talk about your mom and dad issues versus me trying to talk to you about drinking water.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Our body is inherently wise, and it knows how to heal, and it knows that you need a fever to upregulate that body temperature and be antiviral in that moment. And so,
can you talk about that just for a second? Like what your view on like fevers and what people do with that?
So,
especially for parents, because there's a lot of parents that listen to it.
What we advise parents on is, when it's a low grade fever, it's there for a reason. Now, you know, do a tepid bath. One of my favorite fever reducers is electrolytes, coconut water. You want to support the body. You don't want to leave it, you know, with a fever for days on end without knowing why, because fever is very dehydrating. But the temperature is up for the reason that the immune system kills viruses better in that environment. And so the support can be really helpful.
So do you think that's just a kind of American or Western view of there shouldn't be any suffering and this is difficult?
And that's what I was going to say, is our body knows what we need, but we oftentimes we live in a culture where discomfort is just, you know, we have to immediately get rid of it. You know, we don't recognize that, and that has to do with physical health, but also with mental health. You know, I talk so much about patients about what really is holding you back. You know, is it an attachment style issue? Is it, you know, so many different things. Does it have to do with your childhood? You know, where in your life did you enter a time where this particular way of feeling began not feeling safe? You know, we talk a ton about safety and the vagus nerve and nervous system regulation, because when you're in that more chronic fight or flight state, your body is just not in a healing state. It's in a survival state.
No, it's so true. And when your body's in a survival state and cortisol's pumping through your body, you know, it's not a prime location for healing.
Yeah. No one's ever been able to do a math problem or heal from anything while they were running from a lion.
Right, 100%. It's good. Yeah, I mean, we can't be in fight or flight and recover at the same time.
Yeah.
And I do think it's interesting what talking about the changes in culture. You know, if we don't talk about this and have this conversation, then I think most people think it's basically the same as it is in the 80s and 90s. You know, the world's kind of, it's different. There's some technology, but it's like human beings are so drastically changing. You know, I get that thing all the time from, where were all the allergy kids when we were, you know, growing up? I mean, there's one kid with a peanut allergy in high school, and that was it.
Yeah.
And it's like some of that's true, but I think a lot of it just wasn't seen and wasn't addressed. But I do think that the statistical numbers have greatly increased, you know, the likelihood of that. And I do think it's time as a culture, especially as Christians, but in general for people's health, to slow down, you know, to prioritize their health in a way that is, you know, that is taking the time to not just keep putting a Band-Aid on a bullet hole, but like let's figure this out in community and with somebody who can walk them through it.
And it's when you don't have a spiritual home base, it's very frightening and lonely feeling to not feel like you have a community. And when you've had a lot of trauma, you don't even have community with yourself.
Right.
You know, you don't even feel like you can be there for yourself, and that has such an impact on healing.
Yeah, I think so many people just hide from that. Every Wednesday we meet as our biblical counselors, and this morning 3 or 4 of us were meeting and just kind of talking through our own pain and our own struggles and our own insecurities and our relationship with God. And I'm looking at these guys and I'm like, they're such amazing men. They are great dads, you know, and yet all of us are sharing these insecurities and these triggers from our childhood and these ways of trying to be good men, healthy and good dads and good husbands. And people are crying and processing. And it's like, if we're doing it and we talk about this stuff every week and are working really hard and have all this information, then the average person who has no community and who has never opened up, man, they're just struggling. And I think that's what cycles me back through to just having such a passion for our community and our people like you do, is we just want people to be healthy.
Yeah.
You know, and we know that they can be.
Yeah, and awareness is a word that I use a lot. You know, if you don't know your foot's on fire, you don't know to put it out. If you don't have an awareness around that every single person, no one escapes a childhood without a little bit of trauma, because that's, I think, what we were put on this earth to go through and experience, and then as an adult unpack and be able to learn lessons from and be able to see where God can use those times in your life.
Yeah, I think to wrestle with that for a second, I think when people hear that you were put on the earth to suffer, you know, they can give a little resistance to that. And the clarity I would say is that's true after the fall.
Yeah.
That God's intention with trauma was that we wouldn't experience any of it, that we would be in perfect shalom and peace with him, that we would rely on him, that we would trust in him, and that we would produce children and multiply and spread that kingdom message out to the rest of the world. Then the fall happens. And because of the fall, now God is using the brokenness and the suffering that Satan meant for evil, and he's turning it for good.
Absolutely.
And so it's this like thing I think we're really wrestling with in a postmodern world of like, what do we do with this suffering?
Yeah.
And when you lose a baby or you have cancer, or, you know, it's like, okay, well, why would God, a lot of people ask, why would God do this? Why does God allow a bus full of children to get in a wreck, you know? And it's like, well, we have to take in perspective the original plan. And now God is dealing with, you know, our choice, Satan's choice, the fall, and he's making good out of all these things.
Yeah, and
That makes sense.
Oh, yeah, and a lot of people who do wrestle with that question of why do good things happen to bad people, I think they oftentimes forget to look at the good of free will, because we have a lot of benefits to being able to not be robotic and all the same, and you can only know that you enjoy the warm if you've been cold.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, we were talking about that this week with, you know, our kids are 7 and 10. I know you have some older ones, but it's like we were at a Bible study or like a community meal, and it was a lot of people with young babies, you know, and I was just, me and Grady, my oldest, have been having these difficult conversations about, you know, just morality and life and, you know, puberty's coming up and all these things. And I was looking at those and I was like, I remember when people told me this is the easy phase.
Yeah.
And I was like, you're crazy. I haven't slept. I'm tired.
Yeah.
You know, and now you're having these big conversations. And I'm sure as you get in the teenage years, they just keep getting bigger. And, you know, as I treat 17-year-olds, I'm like, oh man, I'm going to have this conversation with Grady in 7 years. Like, this is much harder than wiping somebody's butt, even though that's exhausting. So I do think you're right. I think looking at the blessings that come out of our suffering and our free will, you know, is so important for mental and emotional health. Is that's not, I think what we're scared of is kind of spiritually bypassing people.
I was just about to say that.
Yeah.
I was going to use that exact term.
Yeah.
And I was going to say that's not to say to spiritually bypass. Feeling the feelings, sitting in the discomfort for a minute, asking for support. That's where the growth comes.
And even if it's normal, I think a lot of like go-getters and driven people, they think crying or feeling their feelings is unproductive. You know, they're like, why would I do this? Like, it's not going to do anything. It's not going to change anything. It's not going to fix anything, from a perspective that it's not going to change that the bad thing happened.
Yeah.
No, it's not. But what it will do is it allows you to share with another human being and receive the comfort and love and compassion that you need to walk through that thing so that you can find hope.
Yeah. And going back to attachment, a lot of times it's hard to believe that people would care. And so a lot of times people save them the burden, of dealing with that. And so they just kind of keep everything suppressed. And those are kind of some of the people who have the most chronic illness challenges, is because their body is bearing all of that. There's a book that I love that's called The Body Keeps the Score. And it talks all about that. And really there takes a lot of healing to be able to believe that you're worthy of people caring to hear those things.
Oh yeah. That Bessel van der Kolk book, man. Yeah. It is, I've sent certain people to it, and other people I'm like, here's the lighter version. Yeah. Because it's a trudge. Yeah. I mean, it is great though. But yeah, I think just like with what you're doing, I tend to believe that we think we're way more involved than we are. As a society, like we tend as Americans to think, man, we've got all these things figured out and the science is great. And I feel like we're just in like the baby phase of like looking at humans. Yeah. I was listening to something the other day and it was talking about just science and religion and the odds that's been at. And I think we're at more of a time where people realize that spirituality and science actually go together a lot. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting that within the science world, especially within a non-Christian view, that we've studied everything so much in the last decade or so, and we think we have such a good grasp on everything, except for the things that are actually studying. Mm-hmm. Like we've left the humans that are doing the science. Yeah. We don't have a good, crisp worldview of them and their bodies and where they come from and why they do what they do. But yeah, we've figured out the stars and we've figured out math and we've figured out all these things. We think we've got all that, and yet we've left the human being who's actually learning all of that. Yeah. And I think we're all lots of people are wanting to get back to we used to do that, and then we had generations where we don't. And
I think the pendulum always swings too far and in either direction, then it comes back. And I think, the pendulum, I'm hoping and thinking that the pendulum is swinging back a little bit on technology, because we were so excited to get technology and the internet, and it was just everything at our fingertips, and there's so many benefits to it. But I think we're now seeing that if you immerse yourself in that too much and you are so dependent upon that, you do lose sight of nature and smaller communities. And I just don't think our brains are meant to know what 300 of our closest friends are doing at the exact same time, and what they ate for breakfast, and where they're going to go, and what their opinion was, even of everything. But the thing that I was thinking of a second ago that you said was, with technology and back to the basics and all of these things, my relationship with God was able to grow so much through functional medicine, because you really learn the intricacies that this was not an accident. Mm-hmm. There's no way that this could not have been spoken into existence by a huge power like God is. He designed broccoli to be a cruciferous vegetable to help liver detoxification. Mm-hmm. Like, we just have so many things for healing at our disposal. The sun, all of these things, if we will really open our eyes up to that.
That's great. I mean, that's also such I've worked with a lot of clients who they're not Christian or they're pseudo-Christian, and they're like, man, maybe the church hasn't ever talked to me about these things. And you can have a pastor who's 400 pounds, who's unhealthy physically, preaching about the morality of being like, we've just had this hypocrisy in our culture. And they've gone to Eastern medicine stuff or Buddhism or, and it's like, but Christianity actually biblically has all of those things in it, like the way they ate, the way they, used oil, the way they did the things that they did. When you talk, and when I think functional medicine doctors talk in comparison to Westerners, it starts to feel really hokey. Mm-hmm. Same thing with like EMDR or mindfulness, or sometimes even within the church, it's like you start talking about watching what you eat and being mindful about these things, and it seems really extreme. Mm-hmm. To go, what do you mean I have to give up dairy? Mm-hmm. That's recently what we've been working on. Yeah. And, I've been having these really random eye flare-ups for those that don't see me on a weekly basis above my eyelids. Like, I thought it was jujitsu. And then it just kept happening. So I was meeting with Dr. Payne and, continued to try to figure it out. So I gave up dairy. We worked through some things. I've taken some vitamins, and it's continued to clear up and be awesome. So, and then I ate ice cream and pizza over over Christmas, and literally immediately the next day my eyes were itching so bad. And again, so it's ruling it out. I'm like, okay, I'm pretty sure it's dairy. It could be sugar, it could be a couple things, but it was a sacrifice, quote, to give up that thing. But man, I felt so good and still feel so good just from the work. But it took, we met, a quarter of the year last year ago and started working on the process, and then ruled some things out and took some vitamins and kind of tried to go, okay, is it this? Is it that? Maybe we increase this. Let's look at your labs. Let's figure out what needs to be increased. And I think you did an incredible job, and shout out to Brittany as well for, just helping me navigate what could it be? Let's try this. But the instinct is, but my eyes itch, and I need this to go away tomorrow. I'm going to speak. I don't want to put makeup on. I still want to go to jujitsu. Yeah. But that's just not how it works. And yet, being consistent, it wasn't 3 years. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I think that's the message that Christ has for us is in discipline and obedience. Look, you don't have to be perfect. I've already been perfect for you. I've covered you. And yet, who inherits the kingdom of God is those who do the will of the Father. So it isn't you inherit the kingdom of God if you just do nothing that I tell you to do, because then you don't believe in me. Yeah. But it's also not, you don't do these things expecting, that you did them and now you're being saved because of your good works. And I think it's the same way within health. It's like you do these things because you truly believe they're good for you, they're better for you, and that God will use them for your good in the long run. Or you keep eating ice cream and dairy because it tastes good, or you think it tastes good, and you just have a habit. Yeah. For me, the last 5 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever, I'm like, why do I need to put cheese on tacos? Or why do I need to, once I stopped doing it, I was like, I don't even know if it tastes better with cheese on it. Yeah. And now that I've not eaten it, I'm like, I actually taste the flavor of the steak in a different way. I mean, it's still good. Yeah. But my brain's like, well, it's not as good if I don't put cheese on it. Yeah. And it's like, that's such a crazy analogy for so many things.
It is. There's so many lessons to be learned about life through our health and our ability to handle discipline and discomfort. And I'm right there with you. It's, you can know you want to get up early and have this routine, and then you turn around and you're like, why am I not doing this? And in speaking of elimination diets and things like that, there is even, we can go one step further, which we're going to go with you, and try to figure out if there's something that is triggering the response to that, because sometimes the goal is not to just get you off dairy or villainize dairy. It's to really figure out why your body's reacting to it. And then also it's to kind of incorporate and see, well, what if I really incorporated grass-fed dairy where the cow was cared for and not in a factory that, he couldn't even move, and given antibiotics and steroids, and all these things. And so that's always fun with patients too, is to kind of hear them come back and say, I found just the right amount that I do well with, I feel good with, and I don't feel so restrictive. Because when we feel like someone is, we feel like we're losing control of that, situation. And a lot of times the control we love is a false sense of control.
Always, right? Yeah, we have none anyway. Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, it's also, it goes back to the immediate gratification, which is, seek first the kingdom of God and all his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. It's like, man, do we really believe that? Do we really believe that if we defer our reward and don't get the immediate thing that we want, that better things are going to come? And a lot of times I don't. Yeah. I want to, and I need to be in the Word. I need to have accountability with you and friends and my therapist and my pastor. And, I feel like I have 10 people in my life who are constantly picking at me about something, which is good. It's annoying, because we all want to just be left alone to some degree to our devices, because it's much more difficult to be in relationship and have to constantly, try to be better. Yeah. Sometimes we're just like, man, I need a break. And I think going back to the extreme, I don't know about you, but the predominant culture, predominant medicine, or predominant care for people or relationships is just super unhealthy. And so, of course, when you're asking people to give up stuff and you're asking them to be mindful and be intentional and be patient, that seems really drastic, which to me brings us back to Matthew. And it's like, wide is the gate and many find it, that leads to destruction, and narrow is the road and few find it that leads to life.
Yeah.
And it's like that abundant life that Jesus is calling us to is not just, a bank account that's full and a vacation home we can go to, or a new car, or whatever the thing is people are striving for, or even our kids being like straight A students.
I think that comes to the life of convenience. We all, and I found myself when my kids were young, it was like that badge of honor for anything that could make something happen faster.
Mm-hmm.
If you could dry the bottles faster, if you could get somewhere faster. And I realized, later, like, wow, convenience comes with toxins, where and believe me, I use a microwave. I'm not about to say that I don't. But when we microwave our food, it's not the best for it.
Right.
Let's be real. But we do it because it's convenient. Mm-hmm. We do these certain things. We use plastic a lot, out of a sense of convenience. And I think whenever you are, especially me speaking as a mom, you're like, oh, I have all the newest Target gadgets. I am on top. And when that is your measure of success, then we're kind of missing the boat. And I wish I had made that realization when my kids were little, but I'm glad I made it before, they're out of the house at least. So
no, it's good. I mean, again, that extreme, I think that's what we see with people who don't want to follow God. Like they're okay with him being a savior, but they're not okay with him being a king. Mm-hmm. Right? They're okay with him. Jesus is my homeboy and he's my friend. He's my pal, and he is. And at the same time, he's a king. And with a king, you have to submit to his will and his authority and his rules and his law. And so it's interesting because it's like, yeah, you're right. Convenience comes at a cost. Mm-hmm. And it feels extreme, but I think everybody's got to kind of pick their battles.
Yeah.
There's certain things that...
Moderation.
Yes. Like, I mean, yeah.
That good old word that we love.
If you can, drink out of a glass bottle, or, get one of those glass water bottles and carry it around and drink out of it. Why? Because over the course of 30 years of your life, you are making an impact on what you're putting in your body.
Oh, yeah.
But to say these people that are like, never going to drink out of plastic at the cost of their relationships and their time and their family. Then you're stressed
about something, to the degree that it will affect your health.
Yeah, or you're offended because other people don't take it as serious as you do.
Yes, for sure.
I know I've had to be humbled in that, learning that I can't talk anybody into anything.
Yeah. That's back to the word awareness. You have to meet people where they are because they're not ready until they're ready, and you can, that's a lot of times when I look back at my note, I bring a lot of the same instructions and I'm saying, you're going to get these again because you weren't ready yet to do that one. And that's okay.
Yeah.
But you're going to get the reminder again because, I tell my patients, as it's a little humorous, but I say, take these instruction sheets and please read them once a month for 4 months. It's a little bit like the Bible in the sense that a different number will stand out to you, like a different verse.
Yeah.
And wherever you are, it will mean something different to you that day, just like the Bible does.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, the times that I've come in and been like, I know I was supposed to do this and I didn't do it, and that's why, which is another, scripture of, we were just reading with the boys last week, is don't look at the speck in somebody else's eye when you got a plank in yours. And so as a therapist, I want my clients to do what I tell them. Ultimately, because it's for their good and I think it would be helpful, but I don't expect them to. Yeah. And I think that's that's the world we're in hypocritically with a lot of leaders and salesmen and pastors and people, is they say things as if they do all of the things perfectly. And it's like, well, when you get where I'm at, you won't have any of these problems. And it's like, oh, Lord, And
a lot of times we're doing things, our actions are trying to confirm our limiting beliefs. So if you're showing up and haven't done anything, you're kind of saying, I just don't have it together. I don't have it. I'm not worthy enough to do these things, wanting someone to say, well, I'm really disappointed in you. Mm-hmm. And when you give them more grace and have more empathy for that, I feel like they can begin a little bit to feel that way for themselves.
That's great. Yeah. You got to give them something different than what they get from everybody else.
Yeah. And themselves.
Absolutely. What, So what are some of the primary, like if people are listening to this, like I love all this, what are some of the things that you would kind of challenge people or, ask them, to come to your practice? Who are the people you would be beneficial for?
Okay. So
everybody, right? But
yeah. So let me finish one thought that I had about aging, and then I'll lay out some kind of tips. We talk about lifespan and health span. And I think what you mentioned earlier, a lot of people are beginning to wonder more about their health and back to nature because they're seeing their parents and they're taking care of them and they're living longer, but they're living longer, not really living abundantly longer.
Right, they're not thriving.
Exactly. Yeah. And so some of the things that we are really implementing can really add quality to those years of quantity that traditional medicine, could offer. Maybe they don't die of pneumonia because we have modern medicine, but they're not going to be as, in a nursing home or debilitated and things like that if they have that. And that was really the driving force behind the Longevity Center. There are things there that help stave off dementia, like hyperbaric oxygen therapy and things like that. So I just kind of wanted to add that caveat about health and health span versus lifespan. And so for our practice, if people are interested, we are accepting new patients. It's a concierge membership model. And so do you do show notes? Mm-hmm. We can put our website in the show notes. And then as far as just some tips for if you're not ready to commit to a full functional medicine practice, or if you feel like you're just barely getting started, I like to encourage people to use an app. I use the Yuka app. It's YUKA to scan beauty products, to start really putting products inside of us that are healthier, that have more natural ingredients, in doing things like drinking from stainless steel or glass and cookware. Our cookware is really big with the chemicals that are in nonstick pans.
No, Jessie we've had the skillet forever, and so I had to order one, and she was like, I need you to find one, and she gave me the list, and so I went on Amazon, I was trying to find it, I got one, and then we got one in, and I was telling my mom, it was like opening one of those like really expensive somethings. It was like music should have played, like the box that it was in.
Or as my husband would say, that pan should have done your taxes for what we paid for it.
Exactly. But it was not, it's quality for sure. But she was like, yeah, it has, so many chemicals and so many additives and all this other stuff. And again, that's where I go back to the extreme thing, is it's not extreme if you actually look at it. It is effort. Yes. It is intentionality. You may have to look at your life and say, hey, these things are important. And yes, they're a little bit more expensive. So what things that we're kind of wasting our money with can we stop doing so that we can afford to take care of ourselves?
Yes.
Whether that's a gym membership or a new pan or a water bottle or, an exercise plan or coming to see you or me. I think people are like, I can't afford it. And I'm like, well, you have an NFL Sunday ticket and you pay $500 a month for, internet or whatever it is, cable, or you guys go, drink and eat every day wherever you want to and never budget your food. Yeah. What if you just didn't eat out twice a month? Yeah. And so I don't know about you, but I find that frustrating at times with people who are like, I'm so desperate.
For sure.
And it's like, well, budget. Anyway, keep going. Sorry.
Yes, and another big one that I really focus on with patients because it tends to be super affordable and often free is nervous system regulation. I just find that when we are in a good headspace for healing, you're going to respond so differently to the way your children speak to you, the way someone cuts you off in traffic, just life in general is going to hit you differently when you have a more regulated nervous system. And that looks like stimulating the vagus nerve through singing, humming, movement, dancing, dance parties in the kitchen. They're free. Breath work. I cannot say enough about breath work. It really, for me, has been life-changing, and it just really helps you to be able to be more in the moment, more present. And I find that's the biggest thing with people when they come in and when they are having mental health issues. They're just finding that they're not enjoying life. And, the saying, be where your feet are. And the quote that's on your email at the bottom, what's that quote?
I can't say
I'm gonna put you on the spot and make you forget. But it's basically that same thing. It's wherever you are. That's it. Wherever you are, be there. That's the quote. Right. We've moved on to the next thing, whether it's the next meal we're going to eat, the next trip we're going to take, or even the next 5 minutes of where we need to be. We're just constantly in a hurry, and I'm so guilty of that. And so that's why for me that has been life-changing, is nervous system regulation. That's
so good to kind of put that in the theological perspective. It's like, isn't that what God's asking us to do? Doesn't he say, I am?
Be still and know.
Right. Yeah. He doesn't say I was or I will be. He is.
The present moment.
But when we go chasing happiness, when we go looking forward in the future and our future plans and hopes, and even in our health being a certain way, or even in my eye thing going away, or if we go back in the past and go, all I do is dwell on what I didn't do and what I should have done and what my mom and dad should have done or what somebody did to me. There's appropriate times for those. I'm not saying that you shouldn't. But if you do a pie chart in your life and on your day and you go, how much of my day did I spend in the past in shame or in the future in fear? You're telling your body, to be worked up and to be anxious and to be sad and to, experience those things. When in reality, you can't control any of that anyway. Yeah. You can't change what's happened in the past, and you certainly are not going to predict what goes on in the future.
And so many of our decisions are based on fear, and I really feel like that a lot of what medicine does is, let me give you this thing because I'm fearful that you'll develop this, or I'm fearful that this may happen.
Yeah, and some of that's just if doctors are honest, some of that's just CYA. It's just lawsuit, and you do the best you can, and you give somebody the best care you can as a doctor, and they come back and sue you because it didn't go the way you said. Yeah, and unfortunately, with litigation and all these things, it's like anybody can literally sue anybody, and they just settle with them for, they get some money out of the deal, even if there was never any proof or even a trial about what happened. So I do think we've got to be very careful with our treatment, with where we bring our kids, with how we take care of ourselves, to go to people who, have a robust, view of you and culture and medicine. And I think as Christians, man, it's really important to go to doctors who, value prayer and value, not just helping people fix whatever their medical issue is, but looking at it and going, hey, is there a spiritual issue here? Is there an emotional issue here? Yes is the answer to all of it all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we just, silo up so much. I think, I just wish that people would, listening to this, would just take a breath, in the beginning of January. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of New Year's resolutions, but I do think that the Bible gives us tons of examples of stones and markers and flags in the ground and imagery and symbols of times to change and to remember what God has done.
And reset.
So, yes. And so, in this new year, I hope that people who are dealing with their health, or if they have things especially that, are nagging problems that they don't think are too big, but nobody can figure out. I know especially with women, thyroid issues, postpartum, just hormonal. I think women are going to menopause way earlier than they were. I'm hearing this from tons of my clients and tons of my friends and their wives. Yeah. All of that, you don't have to stay stuck not knowing. Yes, it's going to take some time. Yes, it's going to take some money. Yes, it's going to take some investment in your care. But please don't let those problems continue to build up. Yeah,
I tell patients often what we're doing is optimization. We're not waiting until you're in a disease state to want to feel better, and we're optimizing the way you feel. But also in that same vein, we want to stay young forever, and we're frustrated by aging. And so aging gracefully, and it's its own conversation, but certainly you don't just sit back and say, well, I was designed to be old. When I'm discussing hormone replacement therapy with patients, I often give them the example, well, you kind of went to the store and bought those readers. You didn't just say, well, my eyes were meant to not see as well anymore, know? And so sometimes that optimization of feeling better is appropriate,
That's great. All right. Any closing thoughts, comments, anything we didn't cover that you want to talk about?
I think we covered everything.
Yeah, well, that was awesome. I'm really thankful for you coming on and you know talking about this stuff. I think your practice is amazing. I think for those of you out there listening that at least live in Shreveport and Bossier, but if you live anywhere else, you know, look in your area, find somebody who is holistic in their treatment. Go meet with them, interview them, talk to them. I think we're in a new world where, you know, we need to all slow down, prioritize our family and our kids, what we put in our bodies, because we do, you know, live in the temple of God here. Like, this is our body is the temple, and you don't have to be rigid. You don't have to be crazy. You don't have to be legalistic. But December 2025 is coming. Right? Like, this is my favorite thing to think about is it's going to come. It's going to get here one way or the other. And for most of us, it's going to get here way faster than we think, right? We're going to be in July all saying, can you believe it's July? It's going to be Christmas before we know it. And it's going to be Christmas. So what are 2 or 3 things that you can do that are bite-sized chunks that you can start to address in January that, you know, by the time you get to December, you've done, you know, 50 times instead of getting to December and going, oh man, it was just too much to chew up and too much to bite, so I didn't do anything.
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, one thing I would say is to really try to look at where your food is coming from. If you can afford organic, it really does make a difference. There's no pesticides on it that your body's going to have to detox. Using food as medicine is huge. Like I mentioned earlier, broccoli helps with liver detoxification, and, you know, curry powder helps with inflammation. And so really using food as medicine, movement practices, you know, things you don't have to. Lifting weights is so key in building muscle mass, but it doesn't have to be 5 days a week, 9 exercises, 3 sets of 12. It can be, you know, easing into that.
Yeah, I've been doing, you know, trying to do almost every day like a 20-minute aerobic weight workout. And I grew up, you know, doing an hour and a half heavy weights, trying to put on muscle. Yeah. And at 42, I don't need all that. And I feel incredible just doing 20 minutes when the kids go to sleep, you know, or doing some push-ups, you know, and sit-ups and stretching. And
I think, you know, finding 3 sets of data that you can track, I think is really helpful. One of those being, I'll give you an example that I use for patients a lot, is to track their HRV. Because that's a recovery index. It's your heart rate variability. It shows us whether you are in mostly fight or flight, or whether you can go in and out of fight or flight, parasympathetic, sympathetic throughout the day. And that's something that you can track. It goes down. You want it to be high. The higher, the better. And things that lower it are alcohol, stress, lack of sleep, and, you know, just having that nervous system dysregulation.
And so how can they track it?
You can track it on like a smartwatch or an Aura ring, or I think Fitbits will track it as well, but those are the big things. Okay. Another big one that I try to incorporate is less EMF. So if you can, turn your wireless router off at night. Don't sleep with your phone by your bed. If you have to, put it on airplane mode. We're so available to people, and we're so fearful of what if it rings during the night. But I don't, you know, there's just a lot of risk with that radiation right there by your head. So there's a few for you.
That's good. No, it's super helpful. Again, I think these are little things that we can control in a world where we can't control much.
Yes. And, you know, a lot of people will say, you know, well, what supplements do you take? And really just getting started with like a good quality methylated B vitamin and a multivitamin. That's huge. There's so many people that have genomic, you know, these SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms like MTHFR, and that's not really well talked about.
Oh, nobody knows
Western
what
medicine. Yeah. But it's such an easy fix. It's the good quality methylated B vitamin, and I can put our full script link in the show notes also, because then you're really you're taking supplements from a company that's third party tested, so you know they're having to show that what the milligram says it is, it actually is.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, all that, and just a attest. All that's been so good for our family and for me. And I have MTHFR and didn't know what that was until we had kids and they had allergies and we were trying to figure all that stuff out. So it's
genomics is fascinating. It's growing so fast.
Yeah, I mean, we're learning so much about the human body and how God wired it, and He's given us so many natural ways of treating it. It's just in His way, not going to be a lot of instant gratification.
Yes.
Yeah, sometimes things happen pretty quickly, relatively, but not in like a day.
Yes, and thank you also for the care that you provide for our patients. We refer to your therapists, and they get great care, and it's just so important to have that ability to unpack how your mental health affects your physical health.
Absolutely. You're welcome. I love it. I love that we're friends. I love that, you help our community. And guys, there are a lot of, to give the caveats, I love them. Don't give up on your regular doctors. No, nobody's saying that going to the doctor's bad or that, you don't need that care. We need doctors. We need people providing all kinds of ways.
And we do too. In closing, we absolutely use medicine. I wrote a prescription for an antibiotic this morning. We use the blend when it's time, and we're so glad to have those resources. It's just that usually there's a holistic complement that goes right along with it. Recommended something that would be supportive to their immune system right along with that.
That's amazing. Well, praise God for you. Thank you for coming on. And guys, we thank you for listening, and we hope that 2025 is awesome. I know over the next couple months we'll have more podcasts. I'm going to do a bunch on my own. I'm going to do a little series. I know people have been asking me about the Katrina series. So, I did episode 2, I think right at the end of the year. So this is the 20th anniversary this year in August. So I should have 3 to 5 more episodes coming out with some interviews and some people who were there with me and military people. And so look forward to that. God bless you and have a good week.